Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever, really tried to get why you do certain things, why you push yourself when you're totally wiped, or why, I don't know, a simple comment makes your day, or that urge to help a complete stranger? We've got this really fascinating pile of sources you shared with us that gets right into that why, but not just like simple behavior. It's more like this huge, messy, amazing picture of what being human is all about.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting here is how they look at human performance. It's way bigger than just, how productive you are or what skills you have. These sources, they define it really broadly. It's like a lens on the whole human experience.
That's right. They actually say it's how humans live, love, adapt, suffer, compete, nurture, and evolve.
Wow.
So it covers everything from our basic biology and those gut reactions, all the way to how we act in groups, making ethical calls, even those massive existential thoughts we all have. It's all performance in this way of thinking.
Uh-huh. And tangled up in all of that is this other big question. How does artificial intelligence understand this? Or maybe how does it fail to truly get this really complex, multi-layered human performance?
So yeah, our mission here in this deep dive is to really get into these sources together. We want to pull out the key ideas, the most important bits of insight for you, and see what's really at the core of it all.
Okay, so let's start by, really digging into that big definition first. When these sources talk about human performance, they mean things like our fundamental biology, how food fuels us, how sleep repairs us, how getting sick or just getting older affects, well, everything.
Right, and it's not just the physical body, is it? They're including our emotional world, too. That sudden fear or, feeling really happy or angry or just wanting something. And our thinking states how we focus, or when we get those flashes of insight, or just being aware of the moment.
And then there's the whole social layer. That complicated stuff like building trust or figuring out if someone's lying, how we navigate social ladders, how we manage to work together when, honestly, competing might seem easier sometimes. And that huge piece, ethical choices. Why tell the truth when a lie is simpler? Why do we care about others? Or sometimes, why do we hurt them?
Yeah, and even, like you said, wrestling with those universal things, life, death, what's the point?
Yeah.
It's asking, how do we sort of perform being human across all these different areas?
Okay, so now where does AI fit in? Well, it's being used more and more to model these things, right? To interpret them, even respond to aspects of human behavior. It does this using pattern recognition on huge amounts of data, running simulations of how we might interact, using predictive logic, analyzing everything from how we talk to how our heart rate changes.
And boom, right there, the sources hit us with this absolute critical point, this fundamental difference.
Yeah.
AI's understanding, it doesn't have consciousness, it doesn't have a body, it's not embodied.
Exactly. Think of it like this, maybe. AI can analyze the blueprint of a house. It sees the data patterns, the layout, the materials, maybe it even knows who lived there before from records. But it's never actually lived in the house. It doesn't know what it feels like when the rain hits the roof or how the morning sun comes through the kitchen window. Humans inhabit their being. AI, well, it just looks at the plans and the sensor readings. It doesn't feel scared, even if it can spot all the signs, the shaky voice, the pulse rate, everything.
That lack of feeling, yeah, that's the core of it. Let's jump back in time a bit, like the sources do. Way back to early Homo sapiens, performance back then was, well, pretty straightforward. Survive.
Yeah, it was about doing better than your rivals. Hunting more effectively, maybe, or competing with other groups of early humans. The tech back then. Things like making better tools, using language to communicate more complex ideas, and, crucially, forming those really strong social connections.
And our genes were involved too, weren't they? Conserving traits that helped us survive. Our basic stress response, that fight or flight thing, that's like an ancient performance regulator, hardwired right into us.
Totally. And beyond just genetics, humans got creative finding ways to manage performance both for individuals and for the whole group. Things like using certain plants or alcohol, managing behavior through sex or aggression, figuring out that rest is essential for getting back on your feet.
And for steering the group's performance, you had things like myths emerging, teaching values, right? Rituals to make the group feel like a group, and then eventually actual laws to set rules and consequences. These weren't just, cultural extras. They were tools, really important tools for making a group work together and survive in a tough world.
There's a really great specific example the sources use here, alcohol. Its history goes back, get this, over 9,000 years. Just think about how long that is.
Wow. And it has that weird double-edged sword quality, doesn't it? It can genuinely help people bond, lower barriers in a good way sometimes. But then obviously it completely tanks your judgment, your coordination,
Right.
often leads to really bad outcomes.
And humans figured out how to use it, sometimes cleverly, sometimes, well, disastrously, to temporarily switch off stress or inhibition. And depending on the situation, like a big celebration versus trying to, say, build something complicated using it could either help or really mess up performance. It just shows how complex even these basic performance factors are.
So this whole idea of performance is super tied to our internal state, our state of mind, right?
Yeah.
The sources explain how our actions, feeling happy or angry or focused, they stem from these really intricate neurochemical loops in our brains.
Right. These loops involving things like dopamine, that's for reward, motivation, serotonin for mood, cortisol for stress. They're not just random sparks. They create these predictable patterns that are linked to how we act and how we make sense of our environment based on what we've learned.
Okay, and this is where AI kind of plugs in. Because AI can analyze the patterns associated with these states, but it uses data proxies, right? External signs. It might look at tiny facial movements, microexpressions to guess if someone's happy or maybe trying to hide something.
Or it could analyze, say, heart rate variability data, which might correlate with stress. Or even look at brain scan patterns linked to things like focus or maybe even addiction. AI can spot these patterns.
But yeah, that brings us straight back to that fundamental difference we talked about. AI is analyzing and modeling the performance of emotion from the outside, using data points. It cannot itself experience the emotion. It can simulate having a goal, like achieving something it's programmed to do, but it doesn't seek purpose like humans do, through finding meaning or connection or some deep internal drive.
So let's maybe break down those key differences the sources point out between how humans and AI understand things across different areas. Let's start with emotion.
Right. When we feel joy or sadness, it's like a whole body thing. It's deeply personal, tied up with our memories, our situation. AI sees emotion totally differently. It finds patterns in databases, words, biometrics, and it infers a label. Happy, sad, whatever.
Okay, what about truth versus lies? How does that compare?
Well, for us, figuring out truth or lies involves this whole messy mix of belief, ethics, memory, intention. Like, did you mean to deceive? Was it a deliberate thing? AI. It detects lies by looking for contradictions, anomalies in data, inconsistencies. It spots the pattern of untruth, but it doesn't wrestle with the morality of it or the why behind the lie.
Concentration. I definitely know mine depends on sleep and stress levels.
Absolutely. Human focus is incredibly sensitive to our physical state, how much rest we've had, our emotions, and maybe biggest of all, whether we feel like what we're doing actually matters, has meaning. AI models concentration using things like attention algorithms or by spotting fatigue patterns in how we interact with systems, like how fast we type or respond.
And greed or desire, that seems so internal, so, well, human.
It really is. Our greed, our desires, they're often running deep down subconscious drives. Rooted in biology, our past experiences, our surroundings, they pull our strings in ways we don't always even realize. AI sees the result. It observes the decisions people make, how they react to rewards or incentives in a system. It sees the effect of desire, not the feeling of being pulled by it.
Well-being. That feels like something AI could only ever approximate given how subjective it is.
Yeah, the sources describe human well-being as, well, an experience, multidimensional. It's a feeling, a state that includes physical health, mental health, social connection, the whole package. AI tries to optimize based on indicators it can track: hours slept, maybe self-reported diet info, stress levels it infers from heart rate or something.
Yeah.
It's optimizing the metrics, not experiencing the actual state of well-being.
And survival purpose.
For humans, that's deep. Intrinsic, maybe spiritual for some, definitely biological. It's that fundamental drive to live, to pass on life, find meaning, make a contribution. It comes from inside. For AI, any survival purpose is external. It's purely based on the goals humans give it, like keep running, complete this task, maintain your systems.
This all flows quite naturally into the ethical side of things, which the sources really tackle. Why do people do terrible things? Lie, cheat, even kill? The sources suggest factors like power dynamics, scarcity, not having enough, and how people rationalize bad behavior, often to deal with shame or trauma or feeling threatened.
And they make a really crucial point about how much our environment shapes our ethics, don't they? Someone growing up in, say, a war zone where survival might mean making impossible choices, they'll develop a completely different moral compass than someone in a stable, peaceful society.
Yes, and this has huge implications for AI. The sources are very clear on this. AI must not just learn to normalize injustice, even if its training data is full of examples of it happening. Just because bad things are common doesn't mean AI should accept them as okay or replicate those patterns.
Right. The ethical job for AI, as these sources see it, should be to act as a tool that ideally boosts human dignity, not something that takes over our judgment or just boils us down to data. It should try to help create better outcomes, not just mirror the often flawed reality we live in now.
So let's trace this idea of performance across a whole human life as the sources lay it out. It starts incredibly early, like even in the womb. Maternal stress hormones, for instance, can affect how the baby's brain develops, influencing their stress responses later in life.
Wow. And then childhood's so critical. Early bonds, feeling loved or experiencing trauma, getting good nutrition. These things build the basic templates in our brain and emotions that set the stage for performance for years, even decades. Then adolescence hits huge brain rewiring, searching for who you are, figuring out relationships, sex, peer pressure, massive changes.
Yeah, and then adulthood. That's where things like finding purpose, handling pressure from work or life, complex relationships, that's what really shapes our long-term well-being and how we perform over the long haul. And even old age involves performance reflecting, dealing with physical decline, finding new kinds of meaning, sometimes a return to simpler things.
And AI can track data points related to all these stages, right? Health numbers, social media activity, learning progress. But we live these stages. We feel the internal shifts, the wins, the losses, the heartbreaks. AI just sees the digital breadcrumbs left behind by the experience. It doesn't have the experience.
Okay, so given these big differences, how can AI actually help us understand human performance better? What do the sources suggest?
Well, they see some real potential, like using AI for behavior prediction, maybe anticipating things like burnout creeping up, or the start of depression, or even patterns suggesting someone might become aggressive. Potentially spotting it before the person themselves fully realizes it.
That could be huge for early intervention, couldn't it? Imagine AI suggesting, based on subtle signs, hey, maybe get more rest, or think about eating better, or even gently nudging someone towards therapy or connecting with friends, all based on these predictive patterns.
Yeah, or revolutionizing education, creating truly personalized learning paths based on how a student is actually doing, what pace works for them, what kind of material clicks.
And emotional modeling, too. Not AI feeling emotions, but using its analysis to help us understand our own reactions better. Why do I lash out sometimes? Why do I shut down? AI could potentially map out triggers and patterns for us, giving us insight.
And finally, yeah, moving beyond just fixing problems to preventative care, using AI insights to help optimize lifestyle choices for better long-term well-being based on tracking individual markers over time.
The sources have this really neat kind of mind-bending example. An AI noticing a student is getting tired just from how they're typing. Like subtle changes, speed slowing down, more pauses, more errors. And it suggests, hey, take a 10-minute break. And this is before the student even consciously thinks, wow, I'm hitting a wall.
Wow, just from keystrokes. That really shows how AI might pick up on tiny performance signals that we'd probably miss until we're already struggling.
Exactly. So who stands to benefit most from this kind of AI-human performance partnership, according to these sources?
Well, children are definitely mentioned for early detection of maybe developmental issues, stress, neurodivergence, or even, sadly, signs of abuse that might show up in behavior data.
Elders, too. Monitoring for things like loneliness or subtle health declines that signal a need for help. Mental health patients potentially spotting high-risk periods like increased suicide risk, maybe faster than periodic human check-ins could.
Workers, definitely. Preventing burnout. Finding ways to structure work for more sustainable, creative performance. And even society overall, using data to map inequality or figure out how to deliver public services more effectively based on what communities actually need and how they're doing.
You know, this whole discussion naturally brings up some really deep questions. The sources don't really shy away from them either. Like, why are some people capable of such cruelty, ignoring the value of another human life?
Yeah, they touch on that, suggesting some are maybe acting out of deep trauma themselves, while others are just obsessed with power. And they note that AI might be able to diagnose patterns linked to cruelty, maybe even predict it, but it can't heal the root cause of the trauma or the power hunger.
Or that weird thing, why do people sometimes laugh when someone else is crying? It seems so against empathy.
Right. It highlights how complicated human empathy really is. It's not always complete, or it might be selective.
Yeah.
And sometimes humor in those awkward moments is just a defense mechanism, isn't it? Masking our own pain or trying to create distance from fear or discomfort we don't know how to handle.
And what about this? Can life ever be made, Perfectly, eternally satisfying. If AI helps us optimize everything, do we reach constant happiness?
According to these sources, probably not. Our whole system, biologically and psychologically, seems built on contrast. Cycles. You need to feel hungry to really enjoy food, right? Or put an effort to value rest. Or experience loss to truly cherish connection. Constant satisfaction, they argue, might actually make those experiences feel flat, meaningless over time. It's the downs that make the ups feel high.
The sources even try to model this a bit, referencing a really simple formula they found somewhere. Performance equals adaptability times the ratio of needs met over stressors.
Yeah, times fracking. It's super simplified, obviously, but it's an interesting idea. AI could potentially help quantify some of these things for us, or for groups.
Right. It could track proxies for needs met sleep data, nutrition logs, maybe positive social interactions, and proxies for stressors, solver workload data, negative online interactions, noise levels. Then AI could show, look, your performance is likely to dip because knowledge is low and $, is high, or, wow, your adaptability, your resilience is high, so your dollars is holding steady even with high stress.
Thinking about where this could go, future improvements. The sources mention things like creating really detailed digital twins for forecasting our health and even our emotional state, like a personalized weather report for your inner world.
Or teaching kids emotional intelligence from a young age, maybe using AI tools to give them tailored feedback or practice exercises. That could be powerful.
And using AI to spot signs of social problems like bullying in a school or isolation in a neighborhood, or even patterns that suggest corruption is happening within larger systems.
Maybe even promoting global empathy, using AI to curate experiences that show our shared humanity across cultures, helping people connect with and feel with others far away.
So, yeah, bringing this whole deep dive toward a close now. Circling back to that core idea from the sources, human performance. It's not just about doing stuff better or faster.
No, it's fundamentally about being.
The sources wrap up with this really, I think, quite beautiful and profound thought that the ultimate point of human performance isn't just output. It's to experience, express, and connect.
And that's the critical lesson here for AI, right? As these sources suggest. AI needs to learn that not everything that counts can be counted. Not all output is productivity in the narrow sense. Human greatness isn't always in the metrics.
Sometimes, yeah. Human greatness is in the quiet moments, in struggling with grief, in making art that doesn't have an obvious use, in acts of kindness that seem inefficient, or just in the sheer quiet strength it takes to get through another difficult day.
And maybe, just maybe, the final thought these sources leave us mulling over is this. If we develop AI with real compassion, guided by this deep, data-informed observation of humanity and all its complexity, its messiness, its glory, maybe it can actually help us perform, not just better, faster, stronger, but truer to who we really are.
This is DigitView.